Well, you're very welcome to the first Lorna Park of 2021. It's Tomás McCarthy here till 7 o'clock. Hope you're all keeping well out there in these very strange times. Coming up over the next hour, Brian Flannery will pick his all-star hurling team of 2020. Sunday game analyst Martin Carney will chat about all the retirements in the Mayo football camp this week. And we'll also hear from the latest winners of the WLR Granville Hotel GA Awards, Lorraine Bray, Tig de Borca, Stephen Bennett and Austin Gleeson.
Plucked out here by Caleb Lyons. Good play by him. He's going for a one. Has he got this one? And yes, he has. Chasey be happy with that one. Over the bar it goes by the belly of the floor, man. Super score by Caleb Lyons.
So after Waterford's run to the All-Ireland final in December, how many of Liam Cahill's charges will make the All-Star Hurling 15? Well, to help us find out, former Waterford defender and Munster Express writer Brian Flannery is sticking his neck out and is on the line now to reveal his team of the year. And Brian, great to have you back on board for the new year. I suppose let's start with the number one shirt. Nicky Quaid and Stephen OKeefe, the two standout candidates for the goalkeeping spot.
Yeah, thanks, Tomás, and Happy New Year to you, first of all. Yeah, look, All Stars. I think the number one jersey is a straight choice between, I suppose, Nicky Quaid of Limerick and Stephen OKeefe of Waterford. And I suppose, look, we got a good opportunity to see both players, both in the Munster final and in the All-Ireland final, in opposite ends. And in fairness, there would be very little between them. And I think whichever player ends up, I suppose, getting the award, there won't be too much arguments because both had excellent years. Now, look, for me, I think the memorable, I suppose, saves of the year, I think Stephen OKeefe may slightly edge it, particularly that fantastic double save in the All-Ireland final itself. I think from Kyle Hayes initially and then the volley from Cian Lynch, fantastic saves, and really, I suppose, displayed all Stephen OKeefe's tremendous abilities, reflexes, ability to get up off the ground for the second save as well. So, I think maybe Stephen OKeefe, for me, again, he had crucial saves against Clare at a stage when Clare threatened to get back into the game in the second half. So had a really good year. And I think it'd be, I suppose, be well deserving of an All-Star award after his performances for Waterford this year. Yeah,
and of course, Stephen OKeefe had decided to take time out for 2021. Brian, he's given almost a decade of service to Waterford. Who is his most likely replacement, do you think, between the Waterford posts?
Look, I mean, I've long been an admirer of young Billy Nolan. I think Billy Nolan is certainly the forerunner to in Stephen OKeefe's absence to win that jersey. In Liam Cahill's side the coming year, like he already has senior championship experiences under his belt. But since a very young age, I think he played minor for 3 years at Waterford. He played when he was 16. I think he probably brought off one of the best saves I've ever seen in Fairfield in a minor game against Clare. Full length, across the goals. He's a tremendous, shot stopper as well. Not too dissimilar to I suppose Stephen OKeefe in that regard. And look, Billy Nolan is just a fine hurler. Look, he hurls well out the field for his club. So I think Liam Cahill is very fortunate that, look, if he is unfortunately going to miss Stephen OKeefe this season, to have somebody. But with the ability of Billy Nolan and I suppose somebody that has inter-county experience as well. So it is certainly a loss to the panel, but I think it's mitigated by the availability of somebody of Billy Nolan's ability.
Absolutely, yeah, certainly a big boost to fill. So Stephen OKeefe gets the nod for Brian Flannery's number one in his all-star team. Turning to the defence, Brian, who are the first three that make the cut?
I think Sean Finn of Limerick, is the outstanding cornerback in the championship. He has everything you'd like to see in a cornerback. He has pace, he has hurling ability, and he has a bit of boldness as well about him. He has that dash, and I suppose in the modern game, your full back line pace is hugely important. He has that in abundance. I think at fullback, in fairness, I think Daithí Burke will probably edge that position. Galway had a reasonable year, probably should have won the Leinster Championship. I suppose 70 minutes on the clock were level with Limerick in the All-Ireland semi-final. Daithí Burke was to the fore of all those games. Had a particularly strong performance against Tipperary in the quarter-final. I think got slipped early and got caught for a goal to Seamus Callan in the early minutes of that game, but dominated thereafter, and a really fine year. Obviously Conor Prunty would be in with a shout as well, but I just think Dahi Burke is probably going to get the nod there. The other cornerback then, again, if you're looking for out and out cornerbacks, Shane McNulty, Barry Nash, players like that would certainly be in contention. Maybe Conor Delaney, Kilkenny. But I suppose the way All-Star selections, I think it would be hard not to include somebody like Dan Morrissey, who, again, reverted from half-back to play in the full back line for Limerick. Again, had an outstanding year, very solid under high ball, rarely wastes the ball. And his distribution, I suppose, as well, which is a feature of Limerick defence in general, is excellent. So, for me, maybe Sean Finn, Dahi Burke, and Dan Morrissey wouldn't be a bad full back line to start with.
No doubt about that. And who makes up your half back line, Brian?
Yeah, again, look, I think there's a lot of players. It's a tough area to get into. For me, left half back Kyle Hayes was one of the star performers, and probably would be a nominee for Hurler of the Year. His performance in the All Ireland was tremendous, but all through this year, probably a surprise when he lined out at wing back against Tipperary in the opening game. But I mean, he's just been outstanding for Limerick all through. I think he's a definite for the number 7 jersey, and I think number 5. I think Dermot Burns, another Limerick player. Again, he's that modern halfback who can score from distance. His ability to score frees from distance is important to Limerick as well. But his distribution, again, is a huge feature of that Limerick defence. The likes of Sean Finn, Dan Morrissey, they often look for Dermot Burns for that out ball. And he has this great ability then, that crossfield pass to either a Seamus Flanagan or an Aaron Gillan. I think they're probably the two, the two certainties. The number 6 jersey, then I suppose I'm betwixt and between. I think definitely Tadhg de Burca had a very strong year, brilliant in the air, great reader of the game, really has it all in fairness as a player. But I suppose I might be going slightly against the grain. The player I'm going to select in the 6th jersey would be Callum Lyons of Ballydoflower. I just think his performances all year, even going back to the league games with Waterford, he had a really brilliant year. And I still think of the goal he scored against Cork, which had a huge impact on Waterford's season. I'm not sure if Waterford it would have been difficult to go on and win that game without Callum Lyons having scored that goal. But his performances all through, his ability to score, his attacking nature, but his brilliance in the air as well. Again, we saw a lot of that in the All-Ireland semi-final against Kilkenny. He did score a point against Limerick in the All-Ireland. Now, again, I suppose as a sectet, the defence was under pressure against Limerick in that All-Ireland. But again, I would find it difficult to leave Callum Lyons off it. He did play centre-back. I know I'm engineering slightly. He did play centre-back for a period, certainly when he was doing a man-to-man marking job on Tony Kelly, which should be remembered as well. So I just think all in all, he had a brilliant year. And for me, Callum Lyons, I'd have to find a place for him in the team. And it is a toss-up. Tadhg de Burca had a brilliant season as well. But I'd be looking at Dermot Burns, Limerick, Callum Lyons, Waterford, and Kyle Hayes of Limerick for a half-back line. Yeah,
it's kind of hard to leave out Callum Lyons, Brian. Like 1-6 from wing-back is a big total. That 1-2 against Cork, the 2 points against Kilkenny as well. It's hard to leave him off. I suppose, Tadhg de Burca is going to be such a loss for Waterford in 2021. Like, it was just heartbreaking to see him walk off against Limerick, and unfortunately he's torn that cruciate knee ligament once more.
Yeah, and he's had bad luck, for a second time. That is bad luck, and I suppose, look, he has won All-Stars in the past. Tadhg de Burca, he is as kind of a linchpin that any manager would love to build their defence around. Half-back line, and if you have a good centre-back, it's a good start. He is going to be missed. There's no doubt about that. It's even personally for himself, the disappointment, and particularly on an All-Ireland final day as well. They're the days that as a player you dream of. And he really has been unlucky.
Moving further out, Brian, to midfield, a very competitive area, plenty of contenders here. Who are the two that you've gone for?
Yeah, look, I again, a lot of options around the middle of the field, but I've actually gone for two players that played in the middle of the field and, played all their games in the middle of the field.
You're being very traditionalist with us here, Brian.
I absolutely, and there'll be none of this three midfielder rubbish or anything like that. Because I laughed at the Sunday game, they decided to pick only two in the full forward line, but somehow they were going to have three full back line marking them. So there's a bit of inconsistency there. But no, for me, two outstanding midfielders would be Jamie Byrne and Will O'Donoghue. I thought both players had fantastic years. I think Jamie Byrne's return to form, that real energy performances all through the year, attacking, taking the ball from defence, playing 1-2s, scoring as well. I think his return to form had a big impact on, I suppose, Waterford's journey to an All-Ireland final. Will O'Donoghue, again, I think he's an enormous guy, but if you look at all their games, the amount of ball that he wins in the middle of the field, the amount of tackles that he gets in, the amount of turnovers, to me, Will O'Donoghue is again vital to that Limerick team. Now, look, I know that Cian Lynch would have played midfield at times as well. Michael Breen had one or two good games for Tipperary. There would other players come into contention, but for me, the two outstanding players in the middle of the field that played in the middle of the field would be Jamie Byrne and Will O'Donoghue.
Looking to your half forward line then, Brian, Garrod Hegarty and Tom Morrissey did a lot of damage in the All-Ireland final. 12 points between them from play on that day, I presume. Yeah. They are two of the players included in your attack.
Well, look, it's the easiest line to pick. Garrod Hegarty, Limerick, TJ Reid, Kilkenny, and Tom Morrissey, Limerick. All three players, again, you could put them in contention for Players of the Year. Hegarty was outstanding in practically all the games, maybe quiet in the Munster final, but in all games had a big impact on it. Tom Morrissey is a player, again, he would have played against that good Waterford team in Munster minor finals, etc. I think he scored a goal off the bench in a Munster final to send it, I think, to a replay back the years. He was outstanding as well. But I think we shouldn't forget the performances of TJ Reid, and particularly his performance against Waterford in a losing effort. He really carried that Kilkenny team that day and carried the fight to Waterford almost single-handedly at times. But Garrod Hegarty, Limerick, TJ Reid, Kilkenny, Tom Morrissey, I don't think there's really little debate on that line, to be honest with you, Tomas.
No, absolutely not. I think TJ finished that night with 114. It was an outstanding effort from him, one of the Kilkenny greats, I think. And turning to your inside line then, Brian, are there any Waterford players that make the cut in there? Yeah,
again, for me, I think all through the year and in every game, and again, we mentioned league games, going back to every single game, last couple of years probably, to be fairness, but Stephen Bennett from Ballysaggart has really, I suppose, come of age might be the wrong word, but he's not a young fella at this stage, but he's had, again, a player that, bit of a child prodigy, was an outstanding underage hurler. Again, we talk about performances at minor. I think he scored 3 goals in Welsh Park as a 16-year-old on a Waterford minor team against Limerick. But really the last 2 years, and this year in particular, with Páirce Manny unfortunately being unavailable, he assumed the free-taking duties as well. And he was the real leader in that Waterford forward line all through. Really delighted for him. He's obviously a player that works very hard at his game. But I don't think any All-Star selection I think could be named without Stephen Bennett.
Yeah, just touching on Stephen Bennett there, Brian, why do you think he's fulfilled that underage promise in the last 2 years?
I suppose sometimes it's difficult when you're coming through with a big reputation from underage. I think this year, I suppose, you're having that little bit more responsibility, being the free taker, being the main man. And I think his game and this is true of a lot of free takers, it kind of suits being on the ball all the time, where he's taking a few frees, he's on the ball, he's in the action. I think the way Liam Cahill, again, at times he played on the inside line, times he played on the outside line, but there was certainly a concerted effort, to get Stephen Bennett on the ball, because invariably when he did, good things happened. Again, when Waterford were struggling against Kilkenny in that All-Ireland semi-final in the first half, I think he foraged back probably in his own half of the field and soloed literally half the length of the field before scoring a point off the Hurley, which was a brilliant score. I probably emphasised how difficult it was for Waterford at the time, but again, he was the player that was, stepping into the breach when Waterford needed a score. Invariably, Stephen Bennett was one of those players. But I think he's obviously had injury problems over his career as well. And it's always worrying to hear of a young player having hip operations so young. But I think in not just this year, probably the last 2 years in particular, his level of fitness has been outstanding. And he's really, I suppose, he's grown into that leadership role on the team, where he's a definite starter, and he's well deserving of an All-Star. And as I said, he makes my All-Star team anyway. Definitely.
Yeah, I think he's a shoo-in, like an unbelievable tally this year. Top scorer in the country, a goal and 54 points. Stephen Bennett, number 13, Brian, who are the last two members of your forward line?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose another player that again I'd probably play him in the corner as well, because and it's hard to find a position for him is Tony Kelly. You're talking about statistics and scores. I mean, I think it's something like a goal and 53 points he scored in the championship, and to me he's one of the great players of this generation. Again, look at some of the scores. I think he scored 115 against Wexford, 13 points against Laois. He scored 17 points in that opening round against Limerick inside in Thurles, 8 from play. Like, truly remarkable performances. And I think, to be honest, we're probably a little bit fortunate. He picked up an injury, I think, in the warm-up against Waterford, and went over on his ankle in that game, was down for quite some time, really restricted his performance against Waterford. Now, he still scored, I think, 8 points against Waterford, 2 from play, while being restricted. But for me, Tony Kelly is one of the, as I said, he's one of the players of the generation. Again, where do you play him? I know I've read some, I suppose, lineups where they had Tony Kelly listed in the middle of the field, but I think this year, in the absence of John Connell and Peter Duggan, Tony Kelly was certainly playing in the forward line, often in that inside line as well. But to me, he's just a joy to watch, and he's one of those players you would pay just to go and watch him play. And he's over the years he's been outstanding. I've watched him playing in Carriganore there with UL as well. He's just a joy to watch. His pace, his ability just to be where the ball breaks all the time. I think that's one of his great attributes. But again, another contender for Hurler of the Year, really.
Another big hitter, yeah. I presume, to join him in that full forward line, Brian.
Yeah, and look, this is a difficult one. Because you have Stephen Bennett, Tony Kelly in the inside line. You're down to one position left, and you look at the contenders. You have Aaron Gillan, you have Austin Gleeson. You really have a tough choice. Conor Whelan of Galway again would certainly come into contention. And as I said, look, Austin again had a brilliant All-Ireland in particular, but was very influential in all the games, and I think he scored at least 2, if not 3 points in all the championship games. For Waterford, very good final, long range free, scored a line ball, 3 points from play. Having said that, when push comes to shove, I think it would be unfair to have an all-star selection that wouldn't include Aaron Gillan. I think he does play that sort of fulcrum position in that inside line, where they often leave him on his own, isolate him. Conor Prunty would have had good battles with him this year, where he was almost at times on his own in the inside line, or certainly for periods of time. But he is that player that makes that the glue, I suppose, that sticks that Limerick forward line. 4 points from play in an All-Ireland final. In normal times, it would win you man of the match. It's just he had the likes of Gerard Hegarty and Tom Morrissey around him were so good as well. But he's also their free taker. He scored crucial goals again against Tipperary. I just think, again, he's, like Stephen Bennett for Waterford, like Tony Kelly, he's a player you just can't ignore or couldn't leave him off a team. And he gets the nod for me, I suppose, just ahead of Austin Gleeson. I think Austin would be unlucky if he doesn't, given his performances, he'd be unlucky if he doesn't win an All-Ireland. But when you look at the calibre of players, like I have a 6 forwards, Garrod Hegarty, TJ Reid, Tom Morrissey, Tony Kelly, Aaron Gillan and Stephen Bennett. I wouldn't fancy marking any of those 6 players, to be honest with you. So yeah, look, that would be, I suppose, look, it's always, Ulster is always something that causes a lot of debate. But, my lineup would, I think you'd end up with 8 players from Limerick, 4 Waterford players, 1 from Clare, 1 from Galway, 1 from Kilkenny. So not a bad spread throughout the field.
No, certainly not. And just to look back on it in full, Brian, you have Stephen O'Keefe between the posts. You have 6 backs of Sean Finn, Daithí Burke, Dan Morrissey, Dermot Burns, Calum Lyons and Kyle Hayes. You have Jamie Barron and Will O'Donoghue at midfield. Your forwards then, Garrod Hegarty, TJ Reid, Tom Morrissey, Stephen Bennett, Aaron Gillan and Tony Kelly. And as you say, it'll cause a little bit of debate. You have no Nicky Quaid, no Ty de Burka, no Cian Lynch, no Austin Gleeson, but I suppose you can't fit in everybody. I suppose
I'd have a good bench as well, though.
Very good bench, very strong bench. One last job, Brian. Who was your hurler of the year for 2020?
Yeah, look, maybe again I'm going against the grain a little bit here, but I just think for pure ability, for man of the match performances day in, day out, for me, Tony Kelly is the hurler of the year. And I think, we've referred to the performance that first game against Limerick inside in Thurles to score 17 points. 8 points from play, phenomenal performances. I think unfortunately he may not get it because some of the games weren't carried on TV. If you look at the Wexford 115 against Wexford, huge impact on that game. He scored 13 points against Laois, and I think neither of those games were on national TV, so he may suffer from that. But even his performance against Waterford on one leg, he was the player that needed to be watched. He still scored 8 points, 2 from play. For me, I think if we were picking it on impact in the championship, for me, Tony Kelly would be my hurler of the year. Now I know, look, the performances, Garrod Hegarty obviously would be the favourite. He's had a phenomenal year. Kyle Hayes was really brilliant as well. He's going to get a nod. And let's be honest, TJ Reid in any other year would be a strong contender for hurler of the year, as would somebody like Tom Morrissey. But it's just the funny sort of year the way matches went. But you had some outstanding performances in a lot of the games. But if you were pushing me on it, for me, Tony Kelly was the hurler of the year.
Well, former Waterford defender and Munster Express writer Brian Flannery, thanks so much for taking the time out to pick your All-Star team of the year.
Cheers, Tomas. Thank you.
Now you're hurling. Lorna Porca with Tomas McCarthy on WLR.